Man is not what he thinks he is what he hides. These were the words of Andre Malraux, and they carry more weight than most are prepared to hold. You may believe that facing the truth is an act of strength, something noble, something pure, but in reality, facing the truth is one of the most terrifying experiences a human mind can endure, and yet, almost everyone claims to want it. They say they prefer honesty, they claim to despise lies, but behind their words, there is a quiet, constant arrangement with illusion. Imagine a person who lives every day believing they are loved, supported, and secure. Then, in a moment, something is revealed. A message, a conversation, a secret confession. That moment fractures their world. What they believed was true never was. That feeling of safety disappears, replaced by disorientation. That person was not facing the truth before. They were living a lie, and the strange part is, their mind knew. Somewhere deep within their subconscious, the signals were there. Something felt off, but they ignored it. Why? Because facing the truth meant facing pain. This is where dark psychology begins, its grip. Not in violence or manipulation alone, but in the subtle conditioning that makes lies feel safer than reality. Facing the truth is not just about discovering facts. It is about confronting a world you did not want to see. When people ask to be told the truth, they rarely mean it. What they want is reassurance, a softened version of reality that allows their illusion to continue without disruption. In the field of psychological denial, research has consistently shown that humans do not process truth as a neutral experience. In fact, truths that contradict self-image or worldviews activate the same neural pathways as physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex becomes active. The amygdala triggers fear. The body enters a fight or flight response. Your biology does not care if the truth is right. It only cares that the truth is dangerous. So now the question becomes this: if truth activates pain, fear, and identity threat, what does that say about your relationship with it? Do you actually seek the truth, or do you just want a version of it that does not hurt? There is a reason people remain in relationships that are toxic, in careers that slowly kill their passion, in communities that suppress their voice, because living a lie is predictable. It is familiar. It keeps the mind from collapsing under the weight of what truth may destroy. This video is not about comfort. It is not here to make you feel safe. It is here to expose something deeply unsettling, that facing the truth, in many cases, is far more terrifying than living a lie. And even more disturbing is this: most people already know this, and they choose the lie anyway. But why do they choose it? Why would an intelligent mind surrender to illusion? What is the psychological mechanism that makes people cling to deception, even when they sense it? That is the part you must stay for, because the answer is not what you expect. Let us begin where it all starts, with a belief you have heard your entire life. A belief that shaped your sense of morality, trust, and self. A belief that might just be the biggest lie of all. From the moment you begin to understand language, you are told one thing over and over again: that facing the truth is the path to freedom. Parents say it to their children, teachers write it on chalkboards, movies repeat it like a gospel. The truth will set you free. But what if this belief, as noble as it sounds, is the beginning of a carefully constructed deception? What if the truth does not set you free at all, but instead crushes the illusions you needed in order to survive? This belief, repeated for generations, creates an unconscious expectation that truth is a reward, that truth is light, that truth, once revealed, brings clarity and peace. The reality, in psychological terms, is far more complicated. When the mind has built its identity around certain assumptions, facing the truth does not lead to liberation. It leads to internal collapse. Consider what happens when a person discovers a hidden truth about their past. A child learns they were adopted. A partner uncovers infidelity. An employee realizes their career was built on manipulation. The truth in each case is undeniable. But what does it bring? Not freedom, not immediately. Instead, it brings chaos, grief, rage, loss of control. In psychological studies involving traumatic disclosure, subjects often experienced identity fragmentation. Their sense of self became unstable, their memory processing altered, their trust mechanisms failed. That is not freedom. That is psychological disassembly. Why does this happen? Because the truth demands that we destroy a structure that kept us mentally balanced. Lies, while inaccurate, provide scaffolding. They offer the illusion of safety, a structure for belief, for belonging, for emotional continuity. Dark psychology reveals this hidden reality, that people often build their entire lives on systems they do not question, because questioning them would unravel everything. This is where the core of dark psychology enters. The lie is not always a manipulation by others. Sometimes it is a protective construct built by the self. You create narratives to make meaning, to feel consistency. These narratives become the lens through which you see the world. Shattering that lens is not enlightenment. It is psychological trauma. This is what most people do not understand. The mind protects the lie, not because it is evil, but because it is fragile. You might be asking then, why not train the mind to embrace truth early on? That idea has been attempted. Philosophers like Socrates, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Carl Jung warned that the pursuit of truth requires destruction of ego, disintegration of false identity, and confrontation with the inner shadow. Most people cannot survive that process, not without guidance, not without pain. This is why, despite claiming otherwise, many continue living a lie, and they call it wisdom, they call it realism, they label it maturity, even though it is denial masked by experience. But somewhere deep down, the fear remains that one day, the truth will rise, and when it does, everything they believed in will become meaningless. You are not immune to this. None of us are. The brain does not prioritize truth. It prioritizes coherence. It would rather be stable than correct. This is how we become prisoners of our own stories, unwilling to change the script even as reality screams in the background. But what if you could trace that script to its origin? What if you could uncover the exact mechanism that convinced you to protect a lie rather than face the truth? There is a pattern, a blueprint that psychology has mapped in silence. In the next part of our journey, we will expose the mind's quiet contract with comfort, how your inner system was trained to prefer illusion over confrontation, and why breaking that habit may come at a cost most are not willing to pay. Before we go deeper, ask yourself something quietly. What belief have you held since childhood that you never dared to challenge? If something came today to break it, would you let it fall? If you are ready to go beyond comfort, support this work by subscribing. Leave a comment below with one lie you suspect you have been living with. Do not rush it. Let the thought disturb you. Then let it out. Every mind requires something to hold on to. Not just logic or reason, but stories. Stories about who we are, who others are, how the world works. These stories do not need to be accurate. They only need to feel stable. This is where illusions come in. Illusions are not always grand lies. They are often small, silent agreements we make with reality. We say we are fine when we are not. We say others care when we feel ignored. We say tomorrow will fix everything, even when we have no plan for change. Psychology calls this cognitive preservation. The mind will prioritize emotional survival over factual awareness. If the truth threatens your identity, your sense of worth, your belief in justice, the brain will twist perception until it feels safe again. This is not a flaw. It is a defense. The illusion becomes a shelter from chaos. Take the example of a failing relationship. Two people stop communicating, stop caring, stop growing. But instead of confronting the truth, they build illusions. They post pictures, smile at dinner tables, tell themselves it is a rough phase. Why do they do this? Because ending the illusion would mean facing loss, shame, loneliness. So they keep the lie alive, not for love, but for psychological balance. In daily life, this happens constantly. People stay in jobs that destroy them because it gives them a title. They stay in belief systems that contradict evidence because it gives them belonging. They avoid medical tests because knowing the truth would remove the hope they quietly cling to. Facing the truth requires a confrontation. Living a lie requires nothing but repetition. This is how illusions become seductive. They offer peace without war, but it is a peace that decays you from within. The more you avoid the truth, the more distorted your internal reality becomes. Eventually, the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes unbearable. Anxiety rises, exhaustion sets in, depression grows. The illusion no longer protects, it suffocates. In the field of dark psychology, this behavior is not considered weakness, it is considered a learned adaptation. Human beings are trained from childhood to reward comfort and avoid confrontation. Families teach children to smile even when they are sad. Schools reward memorization over questioning. Cultures honor silence over exposure. By the time you become an adult, you have mastered the art of self-deception, and you wear it like wisdom. Illusions are not just personal, they are social. A society that thrives on consumption needs people to believe they are incomplete. A system that depends on obedience needs people to believe rebellion is dangerous. Truth, in this structure, is a threat. It disrupts the narrative, the routine, the economy of belief. So the illusion is preserved not just by you but by everyone around you. This is why people who challenge illusions are often treated as enemies, not because they are wrong, but because they make others uncomfortable. When you speak a truth others are not ready for, you remind them of what they are avoiding. That is why whistleblowers are punished. That is why honest voices are silenced, not for being false, but for being inconvenient. So the question now is not whether you live with illusions. It is how many of them you have normalized. How many lies have you accepted because they make life easier to manage? What happens when these illusions crack? When the cost of living the lie becomes greater than the fear of truth? There is a moment every person faces when the illusion begins to break, when denial no longer works. That moment is not enlightenment, it is agony, and from that agony, something begins to emerge. But before that emergence, there is fear, a very specific fear. Let us examine that fear next. It is not fear of others. It is not even fear of loss. It is fear of yourself, fear of what the truth will show you about the person you thought you were. When truth enters the mind, it does not knock, it breaks in. It tears through beliefs that once felt eternal and leaves behind a silence that no longer feels peaceful. What most people truly fear is not the truth itself, but what the truth says about who they are. The deeper the lie, the more devastating the truth becomes. And the most painful lies are not the ones told by others. They are the ones you told yourself. Your identity, everything you call you, is built from memories, ideas, roles, values, but many of those were never chosen. They were installed by parents who projected their failures, by systems that needed obedience, by experiences that shaped you before you understood what was happening. The child who was never allowed to be angry becomes the adult who smiles through betrayal. The student who was praised for silence becomes the employee who fears their own voice. Over time, these patterns crystallize into a personality. You call it your nature, but it is not nature. It is adaptation. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. The shadow, as he called it, is the part of the self we refuse to see. It contains the thoughts we deny, the memories we repress, the desires we fear. To face the truth means to open that door, and most will not. Because what if the truth reveals that you were the villain in your story? What if it shows that you were not as innocent, not as good, not as strong as you believed? This is where the fear comes in. Identity is supposed to be stable, but truth is not kind to stability. When you uncover a truth that contradicts your identity, you do not just feel surprised, you feel shattered. The personality you wore begins to fall apart. The words you use to describe yourself lose meaning. You look in the mirror and wonder if you ever truly existed. Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development include a crisis of identity, a moment when a person must confront who they really are. Stripped of roles and expectations, this crisis is not theoretical, it is psychological violence. The mind resists it with everything it has, because once the identity falls, what is left? It is not uncommon for people to experience emotional breakdowns when they encounter truths that shatter core beliefs. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as identity disintegration. Symptoms range from dissociation to depressive collapse. The emotional system begins to short-circuit because the foundation of reality has been removed. The brain cannot tell whether this is a threat to ego or a threat to life, so it treats both the same: panic, numbness, confusion, loss of direction. It is a full system response to existential trauma, and still, people believe that truth is a blessing. But they forget that blessings can burn. They forget that transformation is a form of death. To become who you really are, the version that lies beneath the illusion, you must allow the false self to die, not symbolically, but entirely. The role, the persona, the smile, the mask, everything that was used to hide the truth must fall away, and that process feels like being erased. What most avoid is not truth itself, but the process of deconstruction, that slow erosion of the identity they clung to for safety. The businessman who realizes his success was driven by fear of failure. The parent who sees their control was rooted in their own unresolved childhood. The believer who starts to question the very doctrine that once gave them meaning. These realizations do not come with peace. They come with grief. Grief for the years spent lying to oneself. Grief for the potential lost. Grief for the time wasted in roles that never fit. Facing the truth becomes terrifying because it requires mourning the version of yourself that cannot survive it. And yet, this is what growth demands. You cannot carry falsehood into freedom. You cannot evolve while still protecting the lies that defined you. The fear of truth is the fear of death in disguise, not physical death, but psychological death. And it is one of the most powerful fears a human can feel. The truth does not ask for agreement. It asks for surrender, and most are not ready to give it. Because once you surrender the false identity, you cannot go back to pretending. You cannot unsee what was seen. You cannot unknow what was revealed. Not everyone is ready to face the version of themselves that truth reveals. Some would rather live with the lie forever than confront the ghost of who they could have been. The mind does not treat truth as information. It treats truth as threat. When you face something that contradicts your beliefs, challenges your identity, or breaks your internal narrative, your brain reacts as if you are in danger. This is not a metaphor. It is a measurable biological response. Neuroscience has shown that when a person is confronted with an emotionally painful truth, the same neural circuits activate as when the body feels physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for processing conflict and emotional discomfort, lights up. The insula, which helps detect internal distress, becomes highly active. Most notably, the amygdala, the center of fear response, enters a state of alert. These reactions happen before the truth is even fully understood. The brain does not wait for comprehension. It reacts to the possibility of threat. This explains why people often react to truth with denial, anger, avoidance. The truth is not just inconvenient, it is processed as harm. You feel it in your chest, in your stomach, in your pulse. The body resists it instinctively, not because it is false, but because it hurts. This mechanism is not irrational. From an evolutionary perspective, emotional pain was developed to guide social behavior. Being rejected by a group meant danger. Being exposed meant vulnerability. Truth, especially when it threatens relationships or status, mimics those primal signals. Your brain, trying to protect you, pushes you back into safety. And in most cases, that safety is found in lies. Psychological studies on trauma reveal a similar pattern. When individuals recall traumatic memories, especially those they suppressed for years. Their bodies often react with tremors, nausea, shortness of breath. This is the price of truth. It resurfaces everything the body once hid to survive. The pain is not symbolic, it is cellular. This is why many people subconsciously learn to avoid truth, not by ignoring facts, but by filtering reality. Confirmation bias, selective memory, rationalization. These are not just cognitive errors, they are survival tools designed to protect you from the emotional violence of contradiction. A lie may be wrong, but if it protects you from collapse, the brain chooses it. Think about how often people say they feel sick when they find out something difficult, a betrayal, a diagnosis, a loss. That is not exaggeration. The body and mind are one system, and when the truth cuts too deep, the system responds like it is under attack. In clinical settings, exposure to difficult truth is often done gradually. Therapists know that revealing too much, too fast, can overwhelm a person's capacity to process. This method, called titration, respects the fact that truth must be absorbed at a pace the nervous system can tolerate. Without that, it causes damage. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of how deeply the human system is designed for psychological defense. Pain is a signal, not a failure, but when you ignore that signal, or worse, pretend it is not there, the system breaks in silence. There is a dangerous assumption that truth is always healing, that the more honest we are, the healthier we become. But healing does not come from the truth itself. It comes from your ability to hold it, to integrate it, to remain whole in its presence. And not everyone has that ability yet. The truth is not a light that warms, it is a flame that burns. It strips away your illusions with no concern for your comfort. It activates every part of your brain that wants to escape, and that is why many will choose the lie. Not because they are blind, but because they are not ready to be burned alive by something they cannot yet carry. Telling the truth is often romanticized as a noble act. Society claims to value it, rewards it in storybooks, praises it in public speeches. But in the real world, the cost of honesty is far higher than most are willing to pay. The truth, when spoken without disguise, carries a consequence that is rarely discussed. It separates you, it isolates you, it turns you into a threat. Human beings are social creatures. Survival once depended on being accepted, trusted, included. The fear of exile is embedded in the nervous system, and truth, by its nature, challenges the fabric of group identity. It exposes contradictions, hypocrisy, corruption, failure. When you speak the truth in a room full of people who live by a lie, you become the problem. This is why truth-tellers are often punished, not by formal laws, but by silent rejection, by distance, by suspicion. You become inconvenient, the person who sees what others pretend not to, the one who refuses to play along. In families, this person is labeled the troublemaker. In institutions, the disloyal one. In society, the radical. Throughout history, those who dared to tell the truth have faced exile, imprisonment, execution. Socrates was sentenced to death for corrupting the youth with questions. Galileo Galilei was silenced for observing the universe as it is. More recently, whistleblowers face public destruction for revealing truths. Others depend on hiding. Their punishment is not for lying, it is for refusing to. The psychology behind this reaction is tribal. When a group adopts a shared illusion, it becomes sacred. Challenging that illusion feels like betrayal. It threatens the harmony of the system, even if the system is built on falsehood. The truth exposes discomfort. It disrupts roles, it forces accountability. That is why many people, when faced with honesty, turn away. This happens in everyday life. A person who leaves a toxic marriage is seen as unstable. An employee who questions the ethics of a company is seen as disloyal. A friend who refuses to gossip is seen as distant. In each case, the act of telling the truth creates friction, not because it is wrong, but because it breaks the illusion everyone was maintaining. Social psychology studies confirm that people are more likely to conform to group beliefs than to defend objective truth. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments revealed how individuals will deny their own senses to match the opinion of the group. This is not stupidity, it is survival instinct. Belonging feels safer than truth. You may think you are immune to this, but the truth is, you adjust yourself constantly to maintain acceptance. You soften your opinions, avoid uncomfortable topics, pretend to agree, not because you want to lie, but because the risk of truth is too high. The look of disapproval, the silence in response, the loss of connection. And so, people choose to stay silent. They bite their tongue at dinner tables. They nod when they want to scream. They perform the ritual of agreement, while the truth sits buried beneath their skin. Eventually, the silence becomes a second language. They forget what it was like to speak without fear. The most dangerous part of this is what it creates, a society where everyone performs the lie, and everyone knows it. But no one breaks it, because to be the one who speaks, who reveals, who questions, is to be marked, not as honest, but as unsafe. In the end, truth does not just cost you comfort, it can cost you community, connection, identity, and that cost for many is far too steep. The human mind is not built for truth, it is built for survival, and to survive in a world of chaos, contradiction, and complexity, the mind learns to lie to itself. This process is not rare, it is not abnormal. It is one of the most widespread and well-documented psychological phenomena known today. It is called self-deception. Self-deception allows you to hold two opposing beliefs without conflict. It allows you to see what you want while ignoring what is there. It creates a buffer between reality and perception, and in that space, you feel safe. You convince yourself that everything is fine, even when it is falling apart. You tell yourself they care, even when their actions say otherwise. You claim you are happy, even when you feel hollow. These are not just social performances, they are internal agreements. The mechanism behind this is cognitive dissonance. First identified by Leon Festinger in the late 1950s, this theory explains how the mind reacts when behavior and beliefs collide. When faced with contradiction, the brain does not automatically seek truth. It seeks resolution. It bends belief to match behavior, or behavior to match belief, whichever path avoids pain more effectively. For example, a person who cheats in a relationship may convince themselves that their partner does not understand them. A person who stays in a meaningless job may decide that passion is an illusion. These justifications are not logical. They are psychological shields. They reduce tension, even if they distort reality. Another mechanism is repression. The mind pushes uncomfortable truths out of conscious awareness, not because you choose to forget, but because remembering would threaten your emotional stability. Sigmund Freud called this a defense mechanism, and it remains one of the most powerful tools the unconscious mind uses to maintain control. Projection is yet another layer. You see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. The flaws, the fears, the failures, you blame them, accuse them, despise them, all while hiding the same traits within your own shadow. This is not just avoidance, it is redirection. It keeps the truth from entering your inner space. Rationalization completes the structure. You create reasons that sound good, even when they are false. You call it being practical, being responsible, being realistic. But often, it is just a cover, a way to maintain the lie without facing the truth. You tell yourself it is for the children, for stability, for the greater good. Deep down, it is for comfort. Self-deception is not a single act. It is a system, a structure of internal narratives, built over time, reinforced by culture, validated by others. It creates an identity that feels true, even if it is based on fiction. And once established, this identity becomes the lens through which you interpret every experience. You cannot see clearly because the lie filters every fact. This is why self-awareness is so difficult. It is not just about knowing yourself. It is about dismantling the version of you that you have protected for years. And that dismantling comes with grief, resistance, fear, Most people do not want to meet their true self, because the true self includes everything they tried to hide. Dark psychology does not view self-deception as weakness. It views it as necessary. In a world where truth is often too painful, too disruptive, the lie becomes a tool of preservation. The question is not whether you deceive yourself. The question is how deeply you are willing to go before you notice. You are not a liar because you lie to yourself. You are human. But the longer you protect the illusion, the more power it holds over you. The moment you begin to see it, even slightly, the structure starts to shake. And when it shakes, you have a choice to rebuild the lie stronger or to face what is waiting behind it. There comes a point where the truth does not just feel painful, it begins to feel dangerous, not because it holds any weapon, but because it threatens to collapse the entire reality you live in. The most powerful lies are not the ones you hear, they are the ones everyone agrees to repeat, and when you begin to see through them, when you recognize the cracks in the illusion, you are not just facing the truth, you are confronting a system designed to silence it. This is not just about individuals. It is about families, communities, governments, entire cultures. Truth becomes a threat when it challenges the narrative that holds a group together. The lie may be obvious, the evidence may be clear, but if the truth disrupts power, structure, or peace, it is buried, not because it is wrong, but because it is dangerous. You see this in families where abuse is ignored to preserve harmony, in institutions where injustice is hidden to protect reputation, in nations where facts are rewritten to preserve identity. These are not accidents, they are designs that serve a purpose, to protect the comfort of many at the cost of the honesty of few. In psychology, this collective refusal to acknowledge truth is known as shared denial. It creates a false sense of agreement. Everyone acts as if the lie is true, and in doing so they give it power. It becomes the rule, and those who resist it are labeled disruptive, unstable, ungrateful. The truth teller becomes the villain, not because of what they reveal, but because they force others to confront what they have hidden. The system, whatever its form, depends on silence, and so it rewards those who comply and punishes those who question. This is not always explicit. Often, it is subtle. A look, a comment, a withdrawal of support. You feel it in relationships when you say something too real. You see it in workplaces when you speak a truth that everyone already knows but pretends not to. The reaction is cold, not because they disagree, but because they are afraid. This fear is not just social, it is neurological. Research in trauma studies shows that when people are confronted with truth that threatens their worldview, they experience a freeze response. The body becomes tense, speech falters, the mind goes blank. This is not ignorance, it is self-protection. Because once the truth is spoken, it cannot be unsaid. And if it is real, then change becomes inevitable. That is the real threat, not the truth itself, but what it demands. If this is true, then everything else must shift. Beliefs, behaviors, loyalties. And most people are not ready to shift, so they reject the truth. Not because it is false, but because it is too heavy to carry. In dark psychology, this is where manipulation thrives. The lie becomes a tool of control. It offers safety, identity, belonging. It asks for your silence in return. And in most cases, people give it willingly. Not because they are evil, but because they are tired, because they are afraid, because they know that once the truth is fully seen, their world will not survive it. Now pause for a moment, not just to think, but to act. Write down one truth you have known for a long time, but refused to face. Do not explain it, do not justify it, just name it. That is the beginning of freedom, and for some, it may be the beginning of everything falling apart. A lie does not disappear just because it is comfortable. It stays, it grows, it finds its way into your routines, your relationships, your thoughts, and over time the lie becomes not just something you carry, it becomes something you are. But nothing inside the human mind can hold contradiction forever without consequence. Psychologists have long studied the effects of psychological tension caused by sustained self-deception, chronic anxiety, unexplained fatigue, intrusive thoughts, and emotional numbness are all signals of internal conflict. You may not consciously know what you are hiding from, but your body does. Your nervous system registers the weight. Your immune system weakens. Your sleep becomes fragmented. Your energy declines. That is not coincidence. That is the cost of living a lie. The longer you maintain the illusion, the more disconnected you become from your own life. Moments lose their meaning. Words lose their truth. Love becomes performance. Joy becomes survival. You begin to exist in fragments. One part of you moves through the motions, while another watches silently, knowing this is not real. This is how many people live without realizing it. Functioning, performing, achieving, but detached. Something always feels off. Relationships lack depth. Success feels hollow. Pleasure fades quickly. There is no lasting satisfaction, because the foundation is false, and you cannot build fulfillment on a structure made of avoidance. In clinical therapy, this pattern shows up often. Clients report symptoms they cannot explain. They say they feel empty, even when everything seems fine. They say they feel tired, even when they sleep enough. But when the truth is finally revealed, the exhaustion makes sense. It is not the body that is tired, it is the mind, tired of pretending, tired of holding the lie in place. Living a lie is not passive, it is work. You have to monitor your words, censor your emotions, filter your thoughts. You avoid conversations, suppress memories, perform roles. Every day becomes a subtle performance, and like any performance, it demands energy. Eventually, that energy runs out. What remains is a hollow version of you, a version that others may admire, respect, even love. But deep down, you know, it is not you. It is the mask. And the longer you wear it, the more distant your real self becomes, until one day you forget who that self ever was. The most painful consequence of living a lie is not being found out. It is forgetting the truth, yourself, losing your connection to what you once believed in, what you once wanted, what once made you feel alive. That loss is not dramatic. It is slow, quiet, invisible, but it steals your life from the inside out. People often fear what the truth might destroy, but they rarely ask what the lie is already destroying. Your time, your energy, your authenticity, your peace, all traded for the illusion of safety. You can survive without truth, but you cannot live fully. You can maintain appearances, but you cannot create meaning. And you can hold the lie, but only at the cost of becoming a stranger to your own mind. That is the real price, not the fear, not the loss, but the quiet death of everything that once made you feel real. There is always a moment, whether spoken or silent, where the mind pauses and asks one question: do I keep going, or do I turn back? After all the searching, the discomfort, the truths that refuse to stay buried, the choice becomes clear, not between right and wrong, but between awareness and escape. Awareness is painful. It requires exposure. It pulls back every defense you have built, not to humiliate, but to reveal. And what it reveals is not always beautiful. Sometimes it is guilt. Sometimes it is regret. Sometimes it is a long history of pretending not to know what you always knew. But awareness gives you something the lie never will. It gives you access to reality. That access is not easy. Once you begin to see clearly, you cannot unsee. You start noticing the manipulation in conversations, the patterns in behavior, the masks in yourself. You start recognizing how many choices you made based on fear, how many beliefs you accepted without questioning, how many years you spent defending an identity that was never yours to begin with. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. The awakening begins in silence. The lie begins to feel heavy. The truth begins to feel inevitable. But in that moment, most people turn back, not because they do not care, but because they are tired, because facing the truth alone feels like stepping into darkness without a map. Escape offers simplicity. It allows you to return to what is familiar, to the friends who never ask questions, to the routines that keep your mind quiet, to the beliefs that make the world easier to tolerate. And if you are not careful, that escape becomes permanent. You stop noticing the distortion, you start believing the performance again, and eventually you convince yourself it was always true. But the truth does not disappear. It waits, quietly, patiently. It waits for the moment when your strength returns, when your fear breaks, when the lie becomes too painful to carry, and then it knocks again, not with force, but with clarity, offering you the same question. Are you willing to see, even if it changes everything? There is no final answer, no single moment where truth wins and lies vanish. The struggle continues. Every day, in every choice, in every moment you are asked to be real, and every day the mind will weigh the cost, to speak or to remain silent, to know or to deny, to face or to flee. This is not a battle you fight once, it is a path you choose again and again. If you have reached this point, maybe part of you already knows, maybe something inside you is ready to drop the illusion. Even if you are still afraid, that is enough. Awareness does not need perfection, it needs honesty, and honesty begins with one decision: to stop hiding from what you already feel. If you found truth in these words, even if it hurt, then share this with someone who needs it, someone still caught in silence, someone still choosing escape. Subscribe for more, not for entertainment, but for reminders of what lies beneath, of what truth demands, of what it means to think in a world that rewards the lie. This is not the end. The next dark truth is already waiting, but only for those willing to see.